And there's three different versions of twilight. First one is the magic hour. It's this blue light that becomes increasingly more intense. And the reason they call it civil twilight, I think, is because you can still see detail in the landscape. Moonrise is best when it happens during that first 30 minutes. You want it to come up at a certain number of minutes after the sun is set. And that differs depending on what you are photographing.
Where is some place where you'd love to go and photograph?
Well, there is a place I'd love to go, but I'm not going to ever be able to get there because I'm not physically capable. But it's Torres del Paine. It's down in Chile, Argentina.
It's beautiful down there.
Yeah. It's possible to get there, but you're going to be there with a lot of other people. And so it won't be much fun.
Nice to see you, Robin. I know Robin through, he's a local artist here in Great Falls, Virginia, and he's a part of Great Falls Studio. He's a photographer, and I can't wait to find out more kind of about his journey as an artist and all about photography. So welcome, Robin.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here.
Yeah. Let's delve in and say, how did you get into photography?
Well, that was sort of because I was born into a family that had a small photo shop down in Florida. And so as a family member, I was doing the expected work. And that gave me an opportunity to learn just all about the aspects of film photography. We had a studio. We did commercial work, weddings, that sort of thing. I worked in the darkroom with the photographer. I was mostly a photo assistant. So I learned that I liked photography, but I didn't like the idea of being in a Photoshop. So I went off into a different career and kept photography more or less as an avocation until I retired. And then I went at it. I'm going at it full time now.
And what kind of photography did you start out with?
I started out when I got serious about it after I retired was landscape photography.
Right.
And I started with a workshop with a fellow named Galen Rowell out in California. He was a well-known photographer at the time. And that sort of set my tone and style that I've been using. But since we don't have those grand landscapes around here, those big mountains and so forth, and I've been focusing a lot on the architecture of Washington, D.C., but just applying landscape techniques to that photography. So
you started out with the landscapes. Have you traveled around to capture different sceneries? Do you have a favorite place to go and shoot your photography?
Yeah, there's a couple places to go on that I really like. I like Yosemite National Park. I've been there maybe 7 times since I started getting serious about it. The other national parks I like. There are a lot of great scenery there, and we have our own little national park right here in Great Falls. It's not one of the main ones, but run by the Park Service, and they got the Great Falls of the Potomac there, which is a spectacular scene.
It is beautiful.
Yeah. It's just 3 miles from the house, so I get down there pretty often. And if you're lucky, you'll see a kayaker going over the falls.
Oh, okay.
And that's always fun.
Yeah.
Fun to watch. I wouldn't want to do
it. I was going to say, have there been times when, I'll get into kind of the different technologies that you've seen over the years. But have you set it up in any technology whatsoever? And you're like, this is going to be the shot. And then you thought you got it. And then something happened, like you didn't put a roll of film in or something like that. Now you can, there's more room, kind of zooming here and there.
You're often surprised. I find I always try to have a plan going in for a series of shots, and usually, rarely does that plan work out as expected. So you have to be flexible. But usually, Mother Nature will give you something that's even more interesting than what you had, so you get lucky. The other aspect is that you've got to keep showing up, because a lot of times things just don't work out, and the weather's bad. Some lighting's bad, something like that. So if you keep showing up, you're going to get a good shot. that's easy to do when you're around here. Not so easy to do when you're going to Yosemite,
Right.
because it's a bit of a trip.
Although
So
seven times is pretty. I've only been once, so
yeah, yeah. So and
amazing.
I've been there. I've stayed in the park a couple times, and went with some friends once. And one of those times we were there for about 7 days. And on our last evening, it was raining in the cabin. We were in the park, but we had a cabin in the park. And so we decided, what the heck, let's go out to Tunnel View for one last chance. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's probably the iconic view of the Yosemite Valley, where you see El Capitan, Half Dome, and Yosemite Falls all in this great scene down below you. And so we showed up. It was raining. There was maybe 6, 7 photographers there. Usually on good weather, there might be 50. And just as we got there, the clouds opened up and started pouring. And so they all bailed out. We decided to stay and see what would happen. And sure enough, we were rewarded with this fantastic beam of light as the sun was setting across a clearing storm across the valley. And we were the only 3 people there. Wow. So that's when you get really lucky and you appreciate the fact that you're there.
Yeah. Showing up all the way through, right? So it's, do you have a favorite camera that you've worked with, that you still work with? Maybe even if it's not digital, or there's a big, I think that there's been a movement back to the old film cameras.
There has been. There's my favorite camera right now. Usually the favorite camera I have is the one that gives me the most, gives me the best quality image and has the most flexibility, and that turns out to be my Nikon D850. I've tried the new mirrorless cameras. I'm just not as comfortable with them. I find it a little artificial to be looking through a viewfinder and seeing a TV show of what you're looking at, as opposed to just a reflected image. And their shutter and a focusing thing still are, while great, are tricky to use. So I'm better with this D850, which is an older version of the, what they call a digital DSLR, single lens reflex type camera, where the mirror pops up and takes the shot.
When you're taking a picture, what are you looking for? What are you looking to capture? And landscape, it's such a vast thing. Like when I've taken a picture, it's like, how much do you get of it? Do you crop after the fact, or take us through?
Well, the first thing is, if you've not been to the scene before, but you've heard about it and haven't had a chance to scout it yet, you sort of look at it and try to decide what you're seeing. The first thing you worry about is the light. Where's the light coming from? What's it doing? What's likely to happen in the next few minutes? That sort of drives your decision-making process. The kind of, I don't like those pure blue skies. They're kind of boring. So you look for clouds, but not too many clouds, interesting clouds. And that can set the scene. You try to capture get an idea of what is the mood here, what are you feeling, and then you try to capture that. Because basically what I'd like to think I'm doing is I'm seeing a moment, and it's usually just a moment, that perhaps nobody else is seeing. They're not here, or they're not here to see it. And you want to capture the feeling of that moment and bring it back and show it to someone as a print or as a projected image. Composition, there's a lot of basic rules about composition that people follow, but usually those rules are best when they're broken. I don't shoot I'll shoot a scene several different ways. I'm going to take a telephoto shot of a detailed, more intimate kind of picture of some part of the scene, or if I want, want a wide panorama, I'll shoot a series of images across the scene and stitch it together as a panorama in the computer. It's sort of what the scene calls out to tell. Sort of says, "You should shoot me this way." You sort of get a feeling about it.
So it speaks to you.
Yeah, yeah. Which is hard to instruct somebody. Listen to it. You know? Listen to what it's saying.
Do you have like Native blood in you by chance?
I'm sorry. Do I have what?
Do you have Native American blood in you?
Not that I know of, but I haven't looked into that. But
no. It seems like there's like a connection, to nature that to what you're looking at.
Yeah, you get that when you're out there.
Yeah.
But I don't think you have to be a Native American to appreciate.
No,
that.
I was just curious because I just felt like, if there's a deeper connection, soul connection. But again, it doesn't have to be because of that. It's interesting because you said you have to wait for that moment. How long do you feel like you set up and then you just feel like, okay, this is it?
Yep. Usually, the best example of that might be when you're doing a twilight shot. Twilight is a period that starts immediately after immediately after the sun goes below the horizon. And there's three different versions of twilight. There's three stages. And the first one is what Galen Rowell, the photographer I mentioned earlier, referred to as the magic hour. It's actually about 30 minutes, but it's this blue light that becomes increasingly more intense. And the reason they call it civil twilight, I think, is because you can still see detail in the landscape, detail that can be captured. But you have this magical blue light in the sky and this softening of the scene itself, and it lasts. There's just one moment when it's best, and you kind of know it after it's happened, a few minutes after. Said, okay, they're not as good as they were. That varies depending on what you're shooting. For example, moonrise is best when it happens during that first 30 minutes, if you can get it timed that way. And when the moon comes up, you want it to come up at a certain number of minutes after the sun is set. And that differs depending on what you are photographing. Not to get too much into the weeds, but there's a shot of that's very popular now, where you have the moon coming up. You're shooting from the Netherlands Carillon down across the Potomac, and you get the three main national monuments: the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, and the Capitol Building, all lined up. And it's about 7 minutes, if you get it right, after the sun is set, that the moon needs to be where you want it. And that's happened to me once, back in September 5th, 2009. So it's kind of a memorable moment.
Yeah. Do you have it by chance on you or?
I don't. I was looking around for it before the other day to see if I might have it available as a print here. But if anybody goes to my website, it's the first image they will see on the landing page.
Oh, perfect. And just can you tell us the website now?
Yeah, it's photography-by-kent.com.
Perfect. And on Instagram, you're?
At photography-by-kent.
Awesome. Now, do you have a favorite? It sounded like that might have been your favorite photograph, but is that incorrect, or do you have another photograph that you would consider your favorite?
I do have a couple others. That's my favorite one of Washington, D.C., although I've got a couple others I like too. There's another shot that I think you've seen. I'll pull it out. I don't know if we can, if that's okay. You want me to do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
This is.
Oh, wow.
This is Cannon Beach in Oregon. This is a sunset shot. The sun has just gone down. I was hoping for that kind of shot. It was even better than I hoped. It's one of those few times where Mother Nature exceeded my expectations, or my hopes. I know she can do that. I just want to be there when she does it.
Wow.
We were on a trip and we were in Cannon Beach, and I'd been photographing it during the day, walking up down the beach, and then we were having dinner at a restaurant overlooking the beach, and I told Lori, my wife, if the sun, it was a nasty cloudy day that day, I said, if the sun does anything, I'm going to leave this meal. And then I noticed out on the horizon there was a little crack in the clouds between the horizon and the lower edge of the clouds. I said, it might be something. And so I left the meal in Lori and had my tripod in the car, ran right down to the beach. And for about 30 minutes, I was seeing scenery like that. It just was one of the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen in my life. And that
and you got it.
Yeah, I got it. If the water was coming up, it has a low, flat beach there where the water comes up and it's maybe a half-inch deep, but it comes all the way up to you, maybe 100 feet. And so you've got this wonderful reflection in the foreground. And the lineup of Haystack Rock and the two other sea stacks out behind it was just fantastic. Now, I'd been at that place several times before, but it had never been anything like that.
Wow.
So that's one. The other one is the shot we were talking about at Yosemite.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's got
plastic on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see.
It's a little bit hard to see. It's a little bit hard to see, but that's okay.
But it's got that cellophane on the top of the thing to protect it.
Yeah.
But you got the clouds down in the valley, the clouds oversea, the light hitting the wall next to the falls.
Yeah.
It was pretty special. So that's my favorite national park scene, and then the other one was my favorite sunset scene.
And do you, when you photograph, then moving to do you do cityscapes, or do you combine nature, like what you were talking about from Netherlands Carillon, to capture kind of nature and the city together? Or do you do pure city?
In a city, I try to capture the architecture, and generally without very many people in it, if any at all. And so, again, the lighting is important, and I do a lot of that at twilight. We were in Paris for a couple weeks once, and every night I would go out at twilight and walk down along the River Seine. Their twilight is somewhat longer than ours, because it's in a northern latitude, which I found to be interesting. So I had a little more time, so I would do one bridge a night and work my way down the Seine, getting some architecture shots. What I really liked about Paris is that was not a big thing. There weren't a lot of there were not a lot of photographers out there with their tripods getting in your way. Just normal people taking in the scenery and enjoying it, but very few photographers. So I found that enjoyable. So it's mainly things like that. I might get somebody in it if it's interesting. But one time I went to the extreme on getting people out of a scene. At the World War II Memorial, I was there on a June evening, which is packed, as you can imagine. And I was concentrating on the fountains on the south side, the Asian Pacific Pavilion that has a very complex fountain system there. And there are people walking in front of me and walking around the fountain behind on the pathway there. So the tactic I took was to take detail shots. I took 17 different shots at a time when nobody was in that particular section of the picture, and then assembled them. And so it looks like there was nobody there. And it's kind of, if I do say so, kind of a spectacular shot. It's sold pretty well.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet.
There are other computer ways you can do that, but that seemed like a lot of work. And this was just hard keeping track of what I already had captured.
Right. So, technology is getting so that I've seen, the things that you can do to modify a picture. But I do appreciate just a purely good picture to start with.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot of debate about modifying artificial intelligence. This is the latest discussion point to
right.
come out.
Yes.
And that's an interesting subject that is going to affect photography and all of the arts. And
right.
Well, as artists, we will all have to deal with it in some way or another. It can be
if you need
creative...
to get that, we can pause if you need to get the phone. That's fine.
No,
or we just ignore it. Okay.
I have voicemail, and if my wife's here, and so she can pick it up if it's anybody we know.
That's great.
Not to worry.
How do you see AI kind of creeping into photography? Because it's just, it's I guess when technology is just taking over.
There's a couple ways. The main issue about artificial intelligence is the ethical question. When you use it, you should be honest about that fact. But it's okay to use it as part of your creative process. Because when you get right down to it, Photoshop is using tools to change the picture from what it was when you put it into the computer.
Right.
But when you put it into the computer, it wasn't necessarily what you saw. It's what information was captured by the camera. So this debate has been running through photography ever since it started, is what is really real. At any rate, there's techniques you can use in Photoshop, for example, that get into that kind of question pretty seriously. One of them is called sky replacement, where if you don't like the sky you have, you get another. And it is scary how easy that is to do. So if you're going to do it, to make a shot interesting, you need to tell your client that that's not really what was there at the time. I've only done that once, and that was for a commercial shot that was on a one-time publication of a conference agenda, so I didn't consider it fine art that somebody would hang in their house. The other kind of artificial information, AI intelligence that is getting more debate is being able to generate an image from scratch. You give the program prompts and tell it what you want to see. And apparently that is what makes it work is the prompts that you choose to use. Apparently some artists will not reveal their prompts to tell you how they...
No, that's the trade secret, sure.
That's a trade secret. And there are a couple of applications out there that either the subscription or free. There's something called DALL-E. I've not been impressed by that one. Midjourney is another one that I just came across. And so I sort of play with this to see what's coming, but I haven't used it for any of my own images. But learning how to tell it what you want is key. And from what I understand, people who are artists, who understand terms of composition, lighting, can use phrases that they've learned in their craft, actually provide better results than just saying, give me a pretty picture that shows a sunset. You tell it what kind of lighting you want, whether you want a wide-angle lens view, whether you want an in-depth view, that kind of thing. Apparently, those kinds of things work very well compared to just a general command. So that's where the secret is, apparently, in AI.
Have you ever tried to recreate one of your pictures that you've taken through AI?
Not through AI. I haven't gotten to that stage yet, but that would be an interesting challenge. Or an interesting project. In fact, I hadn't thought of doing that, but I think I'll put it on the list of things to try to see how close it can come.
Right.
I have tried to reproduce a picture I've taken before at the same location.
Okay.
Say you get a moon, and this is one I tried, been trying actually, on occasion. A moonrise comes up in a specific location, but unlike the sun, the sun has an annual cycle. So on March 21st, it's going to rise in exactly the same place as it did last year on March 21st. And the same on every day of the year. You just look up where it came up, and that's where it'll be that day next year. The moon, however, doesn't behave that way. It has a 19.6 year cycle, roughly about 19 years. So if you want to duplicate a moonrise next to the Lincoln Memorial that you took on, for example, March 9th, 2001, 19 years later, you can go back there and it'll be so close that it'll be pretty much in the same location. But will the clouds be there? Will the light be there?
Right.
Will it be raining? So I went back 19 years later, and it came up in the same spot, but it was a lousy night, so it wasn't a very good shot.
Wow.
Tomorrow night, there'll be an opportunity to take repeat one that I took back in 2005 of the moon coming up, but it's going to be cloudy. So I have the location ready. I just don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. So there's that way of trying to reproduce a picture. It never works.
Yeah. It's so interesting to think about.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting, because I'm just learning about really AI recently, and I didn't really take it too seriously before in terms of it not really impacting my life until I started to do these interviews and talk to people in the art field, various art fields, how AI is going to, how it can possibly impact them. And then we talked about the act of AI is kind of, okay, you're mentally learning the prompts and, kind of learning that skill. But you're lacking. I really loved what you said about Mother Nature, kind of giving you a surprise that AI, right. I mean, AI can give you a surprise too, but it's based off kind of whatever's in the internet, right? So it's internet kind of surprising you, but Mother Nature it doesn't exist in AI. And also the physicality of being out there in nature or wherever you are, taking the picture and waiting for that moment, I think there's something captivating.
You feel like it's a gift that's been given.
Yes.
Whereas you don't get that feeling from a computer.
Right. And so there's a level of passiveness that gives you peace and something else while you're outside standing up or, however you're configuring things. So it is interesting kind of comparing it. Where's some place where you'd love to go and photograph?
Well, there is a place I'd love to go, but I'm not going to ever be able to get there because I'm not physically capable. But it's the Torres del Paine. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's down in Chile, in the Chile, Argentina, southern part of the
beautiful down there.
Yeah. And it's about a 16-mile hike over some pretty treacherous terrain to get to this spot. The towers, I'm not sure of the Spanish pronunciation completely, but it's Torres del Paine. And you see some photographs that have been taken from there. I said, gee, I'd just like to be there and see that. So that's one place I've always thought about.
Yeah. I haven't been there myself. I've just seen, especially when they show those pictures of Machu Picchu and kind of along that kind of western, side of South America is all fascinating to me.
Yeah, the National Geographic picture of Machu Picchu is spectacular, but somehow the National G, as they are wont to do, happened to be there on a day when the sun was just striking it the shot was from a distance and the sun was striking the place so perfectly, and there was nobody in the scene.
Right. Which they can accomplish that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's possible to get there, but you're going to be there with a lot of other people. And so it won't be much fun. And it probably will not be the perfect weather that the National Geographic fellow or lady, whoever took that shot, was able to wait for.
Right.
They have an unlimited budget on gear and time. And maybe not time, but pretty much. So that's a luxury.
Oh yeah, I grew up wanting to be a photographer for National Geo for sure. Just that was a nice dream to have, and but yeah, when you realize, oh my gosh, everything that goes into those productions, it's not quite. Although when as a tourist, I try and snap my little artsy shot here and there and capture kind of interesting things. So
I mean, those people really work hard to get their shots, and they're really excellent practitioners of photography. So
yes.
I'm jealous of them, but I know I could never be able to do that.
Well,
I get my moments, but
you get your moments, and so do they. So now we were joking about this before about talking about if you were to have a dinner party with your favorite artists around. Who would that be? Did you come up with anything, or is it kind of a funny question?
I remember that point, and I remember thinking that the one person, if he were still alive, I would invite would be Galen Rowell and his wife, but they were unfortunately killed in a airplane accident in 2002. So those were the two that would be great. I frankly forgot to think about the others. There's just so many people out there.
Yeah,
but that would be enough.
There's a lot.
If just those two people were there, you wouldn't need anybody else.
Right.
Except guests that you wanted to be there to also hear what they had to say. That guy had so many stories. And his wife was co-partner in the business that they had out there in California. She was a internationally certified pilot. She was not flying the plane that they died in, but unfortunately, she probably wouldn't have crashed.
Right.
And so she was a special person on her own right. So they were a great team.
So they would fly around and he'd take pictures, or I'm not familiar with his work.
With his work?
Yeah.
He as I said, he was killed in 2002. So
right.
He's not well known anymore. A lot of photographers have come and gone since then. At the time, he was the main guy for the Sierra Club, which was putting out these coffee table books on landscapes. He got his start, interestingly enough, as he was a car mechanic by trade. He got into mountain climbing as a hobby, became very serious, and became well known as a climber. And one time he had his little camera up there, a little 35 millimeter camera, and he was taking pictures, and then they brought him back and looked at his slides, and he got mad because he wasn't getting on his film what he was seeing up there. He would describe this quality of light that you see at 20,000 feet. And he said, it's just so different. It's just so wonderful. And I can't get that. And that made me mad. So he went all in on learning about photography. He learned about the science of photography, the optics of photography, the chemistry of photography. And he would take his gear up there, up to these 25,000 mountain scenes, and learn about what those lighting effects would do. And he became, in the eyes of people who talked about him back there in the late 1980s, 90s, as the color photography equivalent of Ansel Adams. So he was a big deal guy back then. And was able to get to these pictures, places that very few people could get. For example, he could climb El Capitan, which is a vertical cliff, and he could take a picture while he was doing it.
Wow.
So he's a pretty interesting fellow.
So
great teacher too.
I'm just looking at, it's Miguel Arau, Arau. Is that his name? Sorry. I just
Galen,
want to make sure.
Galen is Galen.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's his first name.
Galan. Oh, okay.
En. And Rowell, Rowell.
Oh, I really butchered his name. I'm glad I asked. Awesome. I'll have to look him up.
Yeah, check him out.
Like some people say, well, what's the point of kind of photography? And, it's not like a classical art form or something like that. But just, stories like that, capturing that moment and, being up at a mountain climbing and learning how to capture the light and really reproducing what you see in a picture. There's a lot that goes into that.
Right.
And it's a lifelong.
It's basically you're using light as your paintbrush. That's basically the generic meaning of photography.
Right.
So if you think of positioning yourself so the light paints your subject in a way that you want, or a way that you find incredibly beautiful, then you've done something without mechanically doing it with a paintbrush. So that's basically what he was telling us about and his term for magic hour is the time when the sun is approaching the edge of the horizon, and that's when all of this special lighting happens for about those 30 minutes or so. And he took us around San Francisco and the Golden Gate Bridge area and places like that, landscapes like that. So we weren't climbing mountains in his class, but he would show us how this light worked, and he would give us an understanding of how you can apply those principles of light to know where to position yourself, so you will get the results that you're looking for. Backlighting is important. Sun being close to the edge of the earth. Edges are important. Things like that.
Wow. This is fascinating. So you took a class from him. How did you access that class? Was it just was it through a school, or was it him personally doing it?
It was him personally leading the class. It was back then. Workshops were not as ubiquitous as they are today. You can find a workshop on almost anything and 3 different choices by 3 different people. Back then, that wasn't a common thing for photography, but they were starting to come out. He did a couple each year at his studio in Emeryville, which is just next door to Berkeley in California. And so it would be there were about 10 of us, and I signed up for it, flew out there. All 10 of us were, we knew how to work a camera, let's put it that way. None of us were amateurs in that sense that we would need help on how to load the camera. This was all film days. But even though we were all fairly good, we were all scared to death when we walked into that first classroom.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So
it's
we're
intimidating,
sitting there,
sure.
looking at each other and saying, I wonder how good he is. And then we're starting to talk, and we find out we're all regular folks and, who have a real interest in learning how to be better photographers, but none of us would call ourselves professional or at a high end. So we were all pretty nervous that we were worthy enough to be there in the presence of this guy. But he put us at ease immediately when he came in and showed us that picture that he took that made him mad. He said, here's my first mountain view picture. And we all look at it and say, I can do that. And
right.
then we went from there.
Yeah.
It was also interesting in that he did not impose a certain way of looking at things. He just told you what was out there. We had it was one of the most diverse classes I've ever seen. One of the students was a female, a woman who was a poet, not a photographer really. And so she had a totally different approach to everything that we were doing. We were trying to sort of be like Galen Rowell, most of us, and do what he did. She was off on her own air. Well, he would look at her pictures and come up with a totally different reaction to them in a positive way and see what she was trying to do. And he was able to speak to her in her language and the way she was seeing things. And I don't think I've ever seen a teacher able to do that as well as he did.
That's a real gift. He loved photography, like tremendously. Yeah. And he sounds like a great teacher. Yeah. Wow. That is a shame that the world lost him. Yeah. Probably way too early, I imagine.
He was in his early 50s when that happened.
Yeah. Well, have you worked in black and white, or do you just prefer color all the way through?
I prefer color for the simple reason is I'm not very good with black and white. I, it's hard for me to get my mind around how to transform color into tonalities of on the shades of white to
Right.
black. That's a special ability, and I respect it. Like I know a good one when I see it, but I have not ever been able to understand how it got there.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I stick with color. I know I feel I
Yeah.
can do a much better job
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah. I mean, so many times I've taken pictures and said, oh, well, if I'm lucky, it'll come out,
Yeah.
but there's a whole approach to it to making sure that you know what you're going to get kind of thing for the most part. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
the conversion to digital took me a while. I knew what I was going to get on my slide film. I knew how it was going to react to the light. I knew that I had
Right.
to expose it a certain way to get that. And when I picked up my first digital camera and started shooting, I said, what's so special about this? I don't understand this. I can't get what I was getting.
Right.
And I struggled with it for a couple of years, and finally met this photographer who was good in both. What he did in both were quite different, but
You did.
and I was chatting with him, and he said, you got to understand that digital and film are two different medium, and you wouldn't try to duplicate in acrylic what you can do in watercolors. You've got to look at it as its own medium and work with it within its own characteristics. And that was like a light bulb going on. I was able to just stop shooting film within a few weeks after I started looking at that. Because the problem with film is, of course, the darkroom. And I don't have great skills in a darkroom. I mean, I'm technically capable, but not great skills. And slide film requires that you send it off to a lab. It's too precise. And then printing is such a hassle. Digital is totally different in that regard. It's really easy to work with, and I can do a lot more with it than I ever could with film processing.
So from my days in the dark rooms and such, like there were little things that you could do to kind of blur aspects while it was, exposing and this and that. With digital, there's like, how far do you go with, enhancements or modifications in the digital format, would you say?
Well, there's a whole different range of attitudes. And again, that has an ethical spectrum as to how far you take it. I think each artist or photographer has to decide for themselves what they're trying to accomplish. And I think when I said earlier that I'm trying to bring back what I was feeling, what I was seeing, in the case of digital especially, you're not going to get that when you open it up on the computer. So as you bring it back, I guess I'm trying to do two things, is make it sure it's technically good. And secondly, that I get the emotion from looking at it that I had when I was out there.
Right.
And that may be a matter of contrast, sharpness, whatever.
Right.
Those kinds of things. It's
right.
much the same in the darkroom. You would dodge or burn were terms that we used back then.
Right.
And develop it a little longer or make it high contrast, use a different kind of paper, that kind of thing. All of which are designed to come towards a creative object that makes you happy, I guess.
Oh yeah, that's right. Dodge and burn. I remember those terms. Wow, it's been a long time. Portrait photography. How do you feel about portrait photography?
I've done some of that in the past. It requires that unless you're just banging out stuff like headshots and so forth, you have to establish connection with the person that you're photographing. You have to get them into the moment, I guess, that you're trying to make.
Because you're looking for a moment.
Yeah, looking for a moment.
Yeah.
That is their personality actually getting into the fact that they're being photographed. That doesn't happen very often.
No.
A professional model, I found that with a professional model, you can get some good looking shots, but it's mechanical. It's like pose 33B.
Right.
That they give you. And it looks great if you're doing a commercial spread of some kind, or if you're just doing a headshot for their own promotional purposes.
Right.
With a person who isn't an experienced model, when they can actually get into something that, if they're willing to release themselves and get with the program, so to speak,
Sure.
then it becomes an interesting experience. But I found that happened rarely. And there's just, I just don't get the charge out of shooting pictures of people that I do when I'm sitting out there and
Sure.
feeling nature. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
portraits are a tough skill, and people who do them well, I really respect. It's not
Yeah, no,
easy.
I was just curious, there's like in photography, I think of,
Yeah.
landscape, cityscape and portraits.
And then
And
there's
then
street
there's,
photography. I mean, there's all
yeah,
kinds of ways you can go at it.
yeah,
Cartier-Bresson,
that's right.
the decisive moment that he had that little camera and he would get these shots and he would wait. He would anticipate them,
Right.
something coming together, and he'd get it.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do too. And then it's a gift that something happens
Right.
that you kind of saw coming maybe an
Right.
instant before and were ready for it.
Right. Right. Yeah. I have a 5-year-old daughter and I got, they have those little Polaroid cameras,
Oh yeah.
the mini things. And I mean, you don't really get a clear picture at all. You kind of
Right.
have to so there's an art of like, okay, how, what's going to really work in these, and they're like little mini kind of, prints that come out.
Yeah.
But it's been really interesting because she's used to using my phone and, taking pictures from that. So you see what you're going to get.
Right.
But, had to teach her to look through the lens and then, close one eye, even like little things like that,
Yeah,
and then press the button when you're ready. Yeah. You got to get it into view and then press the button.
So she's having fun with that. Is she like that?
She has fun with it. Yeah. Yeah. But you can see she's just kind of like, she got used to it. But then it's a little bit fatiguing, to kind of have to do that every time for her at that point. But I just thought, well, this is great because this is, what I grew up with. I'm old enough to kind of date back to that.
Right.
Just regular cameras. And so that was fun just over the weekend, even doing that. So
who knows? You may have
sparked something.
You may have sparked something, and she'll be out there like Annie Leibovitz someday.
You never know. I just I'm thinking like, do I bring out kind of the old fashioned, like where you really could only look through, see your picture through the lens like that, or just go with the digital and let her see the image as she's shooting it or something like that, So,
interesting dilemma. Yeah.
It is an interesting dilemma. And then I marvel at the fact now that, I can just, I love that I can see what I'm getting and I'm like, okay, delete that. This is what I like. And, before it used to be like, I'd go and shoot a whole roll. Like I was like in my photojournalism days, and I remember Lenny Kravitz came to Toronto, where I grew up, and I was going to be like the photographer and go in there, and I was even treated as press. It was really kind of funny. I was 17, but they had me in, and there I was, and I was like, yeah. And I went home and I developed the role, and I just thought I was so disappointed. I was so disappointed because I just thought, I was probably nervous and excited and just kind of, wasn't really sure what I was after,
Right.
So
you weren't getting what you saw.
Right. I wasn't getting what I saw.
Yeah.
And it was frustrating. But I mean, still like the adventure of it was great, just in kind of being, even as I can feel in my body, the rush of it, because it was so exciting, so.
See, you had that Galen Rowell moment. You took that shot of something that was so beautiful.
Oh, I had a lot of Galen, but you know what? I wasn't smart like him, and I didn't throw myself into it. So, but I think actually though, I've done a lot of travels and I've worked at it. And I think from a composition standpoint, I get it, but thinking about light more is interesting. And so this is really going to prompt me to get back more into it. But, for right now, I just, with my family shots and with people shots, I love getting people catching that moment of energy, like something's happening. And I love that, but it's got to be, spontaneous. So I
Right.
like kind of the candid kind of photography of I I'd love to do street photography. I'm just very shy, but I guess you just kind of have to get into it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a
Yeah.
couple of ways. But I think with people in Cartier-Bresson's case, I think very few people knew he was doing that. Others, they get right in. Other people get right in their face.
Right.
Or ask. There's a certain protocol that one should
Yes.
follow on that, and that's make sure that the person's not uncomfortable
Right.
if they're aware of what you're doing.
Right.
But that can be fun. I did back when people were doing before iPhones came out.
Yeah.
Whenever I was out at a park or someplace interesting, and I saw people taking pictures of each other. I would try to capture that and try to
Yeah.
capture it with the scene in the background. And I got
Yeah.
some pretty. I remember one of the more interesting ones I got was if you've been out to Yellowstone and been to Grand Prismatic Spring, that big spring with the multicolors, and there's this long boardwalk, curvy boardwalk that goes over it. I was on that boardwalk and I looked back and saw that somebody was taking a picture of their friend on the boardwalk. And so as I raised my camera, I realized that somebody else was taking a picture of that person taking that picture. And then somebody else. There were 7 people in that line.
What a story.
Yeah. So I said, my gosh, I'm on the top of this prismatic spring and I'm doing street photography.
Oh,
So
yeah,
that
you
was
saw.
fun. You put a series of those together when you have what it is that they're, the scene that's behind them, whether it's
Yeah. Yeah.
Washington Monument. I caught when I was up there for a moonrise shot, I saw a photographer professional taking a picture of a wedding couple in their wedding outfits.
Yeah.
With the scene of Washington in the background. So that's an example. So those were fun. But now
Sure.
you don't see that unless it's a professional photographer doing something.
Right.
And they get a little mad if you do that sometimes. So you got to be careful.
Yeah.
But now everybody's doing this. And I find that less interesting.
It is. It is the art of the selfie.
But it could be its own series if you work at it, I suppose. Some people get into some pretty interesting gyrations, some positions that are pretty interesting and funny to look at when you capture them and freeze it.
Right. I guess if you kind of, if you're going to be consistent and you have kind of something that you're after in each one, and you can kind of see the story in it. It's interesting. It's nice to think about photography and what it is and what you can do with it. So
have you, with your daughter, I have always found it interesting to see how very young kids, see things and how they're looking at things and what they bring back. And their view, first of all, at that age, it's low down.
Yes, it is.
We have to get down on our knees or maybe our tummies to get the view they're getting. So they have a different view automatically. And how they see things can often be quite interesting. So it'll be fun to watch how she views these things and finds what she finds interesting.
What does she do? I think right now she seizes on, like, if there's a person, she'll seize on the part of the body that she likes. So if she likes like somebody's hand, then she takes like 1 million pictures of the hand or something like that, just for an example, or like the eye or something. Yeah. So that's her thing. Like she's, but a lot of times she likes shoes, and it's maybe that is because she's lower to the ground and she pays attention to shoes. Cause something like she wanted this Santa statue, kind of whatever for Christmas. And we had seen it at the CVS, and then I had found it. I had found that the Santa somewhere else, and got a good deal on it, and brought it home. And she came over and she said, "Oh, it is the same one. He's got the same shoes." So she checks on who's who by their shoes, kind of thing. So that's actually a really interesting point, because a lot of times I do get pictures of the shoes that people are wearing. So.
That's fascinating. I heard I know a dog photographer up in New York City. I met her when we bumped into each other on a the National Women's Soccer team was coming down the parade of victory after they'd won the World Cup. And so we were waiting for it, and we noticed each other's cameras start talking. She said, anyway, she does dog photography. And one of the comments she made is that, the view of a dog is quite different than ours. All they see is shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. She has
and
a few
smells,
pictures where, and I've seen this from other photographers, where they have a dog and you see the feet of the person, but nothing else.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. So she's down there at that level, seeing what we don't.
You need to put GoPros on them or something like that, and then you can spend a day, as a dog or something like that, or even just 5 minutes. It would be interesting. So, yeah. Oh, fun. Well, I know you've got a schedule to keep, so thank you so much. It's been really fun talking.
Well, it's been great talking with you. I've enjoyed it. And
is there anything that you wanted to add, or we're gonna I guess I should probably talk about your studio. We've got the footage that we can show separately, and to show your premise there, what you have, and that you'll be finding a new home for your equipment. Are you going to be storing it in the meantime, or are you going to be kind of downsizing? Or
well, I'm doing a lot of downsizing right now. The whole studio is gone, are going to be, but right now I'm putting a lot of the gear that I'm not using immediately and extra stuff in storage. So once we get moved in and get all situated, then I'm going to look for a place in the Great Falls area where I can at least open up some kind of presence
work.
And because I'm just moving 4 miles down the road at Tyson's, and that will so that'll be a process. So later this year, and then of course we've got Great Falls Studio Tour coming up. So I guess one thing we would want to get in here is everybody keep an eye out for that, because you're going to have a lot of artists showing a lot of interesting things, and all of them telling interesting stories.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can't wait to have that again. I really enjoyed meeting everybody during the tour my first time last year. How long have you been with the studios?
I've been with them since their beginning. It all began back in 2003 when Laura Nichols called up 4 people and asked them to come over to have coffee in her kitchen. Yeah. And she laid out her vision for Great Falls Studios. Yeah. And we all bought in. So nice. I can't claim any credit for creating it other than I did what she told me to do. And
you're a co-founder.
So I'm a co-founder, but I call her the founding mother.
Yeah.
And she's quite a person, and glad she's still involved in it. So, and I understand you're going to be involved in the studio tour in a big way this coming in October, we should say. Yeah.
Me and Sandy Buffy, she asked me to join her, and she and I, we get along really well. And I just said, well, as long as we kind of, I said, if you need another co-chair, please, by all means. I don't need to be, I'm honored to work on it. But I've got, just a little kid to shuffle around all the time. Right. So I've got that, but it's something that I'm excited about, because if it continues along, I can grow along with it, and be a part of it. So I'm excited to take a torch, so to speak, and hopefully do as good a job.
Your studio gallery there where you are right now, I guess, and is a place that everybody's going to want to go see.
Yes.
We're really glad that you've opened that place up. So
thank you. Well, I'm looking forward to working closer and seeing how we can showcase, help to showcase Great Falls artists, and it's exciting. It's exciting to be a part of this.
Out there.
We've been having interesting conversations about the direction of the art, that we do, why we do it. And speaking with my teaching artist, Donnie, he says, as an amateur artist, you want to become a professional. And then the next goal after becoming a professional artist is becoming an amateur again, to do it for the love of the art that you're doing, because amateur is to love what you're doing, and very simplistic terms there. And so, for you're doing professional stuff, you're trying to be commercially successful, but then you say, well, wait a second, I kind of lost track of what I'm doing here. What is it that I'm trying to achieve? What is going to satisfy my soul?
Right.
What is it that I enjoyed about this? Why did I get into this? And let's return to that, and with renewed kind of interest and energy and focus. And so it's just kind of interesting having conversations like that with Sandy. And so I'm excited to see, as we all kind of move into different parts of our careers, as artists, where it takes us. So, you're just going to continue to capture more moments, and, there's always an improvement, right? That we can always learn how to do more and more of. And,
If you're not striving to improve, you're not growing.
Right. Right. And so we're excited to see, what you're going to showcase at the studio tour, and where you're going to showcase it. So that'll be it to be continued.
Yeah, I think I have a couple of options on that with sharing some space with another artist, that they have some extra space. So
that's nice.
Yeah, so I think one of those should turn out.
And I think we should have some of your pieces in here in the gallery. So, just showcase it as well. So
love to do that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I wish you a great day ahead, and I'll see you tonight at the meeting.
Yeah. Should be
awesome.
Good. All right.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Bye.